I remember when I approached my denomination, I met with a leader that I trusted. So because we were part of a church,
Hmm.
I was like, this poor church does not know they're going to lose two pastors.
Yeah.
Like this is going to implode. So I went higher up to the denomination, someone that had been with me church planting. So I had history. And I remember them looking at me and going, are you really sure this
Wow.
is the road you want to go down?
Welcome to the That's Where I'm At podcast. I'm Laura, happily divorced after spending years with a narcissist. I believe keeping secrets will make you sick and that they always come to light in the end. As women, we're often told to be quiet, don't share your story, don't talk about the things we go through. It's making women sick, sad, and suicidal. We don't have to be on the other side to share our story. This show is for the women still in the middle of the mess, but showing up bravely as they heal. It's time to share these stories with each other so we can learn, grow, and heal together. I'm Laura, and that's where I'm at. Please take note that this episode may contain subjects that may be triggering to certain listeners. Please take care when listening today. Hi, guys, and welcome back to the That's Where I'm At podcast. Today I have Lisa. Lisa is an ICF ACC empowerment life coach and leadership consultant with over 2 decades of experience. She is powered by authenticity, non-judgment, and empathy, and creates a safe, empowering space for her clients to reframe their challenges into their superpowers. In both her life coaching and her leadership consulting work, her mission remains the same: empowering individuals to achieve their highest potential. She is dedicated to helping other trauma survivors, particularly high achieving, accomplished women who have experienced relationship trauma, tap into their superpowers and move from surviving to thriving. Grounded in real life experience, her warm, empathetic approach validates her clients' experiences and provides practical tools for reframing their stories, claiming their superpowers, and building a thriving life. Welcome, Lisa. I'm so glad you're here.
Hi, Laura. Thanks for having me.
I love that. My mission is so similar with validating people who have been through their trauma experience and then helping. I love that superpower. I love that.
Yes. Yes.
I love that. And then I also wanted to touch on that high achieving thing that you had mentioned in your bio. So, anyway, I found Lisa when I was listening to another podcast, and I just thought she would be a great person to talk to for our series that we've been doing on sort of the religious abuse, church abuse, domestic violence in the church, things like that that I experienced and she experienced as well. And I remember you saying in that podcast episode something about that we think it's, I don't know, lower income or whatever,
Yeah.
that kind of a person who deals with domestic violence. It's somebody like me. I have multiple college degrees and
Yes.
that we have an idea of who it is, but it's not always that way, is it?
No, no. I have had many clients. I've worked with women that are bankers in the military, successful entrepreneurs, business owners, high up in companies. And on the side, they'll just say, that's my story too,
No.
but I don't want to talk about it. And so, as high achieving women, we go on. This is
Yes.
going on.
Right.
And come hell or high water, we're going to succeed. And yeah,
Right.
so yeah,
Well, yeah, and we do have that driving us, but sometimes you just have to do it, right? You're just going. I mean, I survived for 32 years married to my ex, and I don't know. You just do it.
absolutely. And
You
you
just
don't, and for many of us, we don't realize that we're in it.
yeah,
So we just kind of that church piece is like, we
right.
believe as Christians, there's one man, there's one woman. We are
Right.
married for life, no matter how bad it gets.
Right.
And therefore, if life is going to be crappy with our partner, oh well, that's our lot in life. That's our cross to carry, and we just keep going. So we
Yeah.
just don't even question what's happening to us. And it's so quiet. No one shares their stories,
Yeah.
obviously. Yeah.
And that's sort of why I wanted to talk about it because I was in I've been a Christian about 25 years. So I spent the majority of my married life staying and praying and
Mm,
actually not realizing I was in abuse, like you were saying, not realizing that because for me it was emotional and psychological with a narcissist. And so I didn't even realize. And then having similar experiences in the church with pastors who were also probably narcissistic or toxic in some way, gaslighting from the pulpit, having the cycle of abuse, I think, in leadership and around me in certain things, everything seemed normal to me. It was all like, oh, it's happening at home, it's happening at church, everything's the same. And so
right.
I didn't know anything was wrong. I had instances, but I didn't know anything was wrong. And yes, I stayed and prayed because, I was talking about this on a different episode about how many Bible studies and things like that there are for women to like be a better wife and all these things like
Proverbs
compared
31,
right.
virtuous wife.
Yes,
Hmm.
compared to what men, it's just not as many for men. And it's like, just be a better wife and whatever. Don't wear a V-neck shirt or whatever your issue is so that you don't
Right.
cause other men to stumble and all those other things. So,
So true.
all right. So we started in the middle and the end, but it doesn't matter.
No, we're just hanging out, having a
that's,
conversation.
that's right. So what was your church experience? Did you grow up in the church? Was that something that was a
Yeah,
part of
that's
your
a
life?
great question. So I grew up in the Catholic Church.
Okay. Me too.
Faith was really, oh, okay. My dad is an Irish Catholic from Ireland. I was actually born in Europe. And so my mom is an English Protestant. So I grew up with my dad taking us to church and my
Okay.
mom diligently going to support raising us kids. And when I was a sophomore in high school, I approached my dad, even though I knew it would break his heart.
Mm,
And I said, there's something else to this relationship with God. I would take communion. So in Catholic service in Mass, we take communion every service.
mhm.
And there was something in my heart and my soul, but also physically, where I was like, that's it? Like, there's got to be. And I really didn't understand why we needed to talk to a priest. I was like, if you're telling me that God loves me, why can't I just talk to God? So it stands out in my memory as the first wave, the first experience of grace that I received. And it was my dad, and again, Irish Catholic,
Yeah.
strong morals, said to me with tears in his eyes, I love you. Your faith has to be your own.
Mm,
Go explore. I hope you come back to the Catholic Church, but I can't force you. This is your own faith. And so I remember at the time being very struck by that and realizing that he understood. So I started visiting different churches through the youth groups in high school. And I attended a Methodist youth group. And that is where I found my ex, or we met. And I was 16, he was 17.
oh,
And then by 19, we were married.
that seems right.
So,
I don't know. I mean, I just saw a lot of 19-year-olds in the church getting married, and it's like, oh, I wonder why you want to get married.
yes.
It's like,
Well, there's certain things you can do and you can't do. And, if you don't
yeah,
want to live in sin, you get married.
right,
Um,
exactly. All
but
those.
I came from a very strong background. I had like 40 cousins.
Wow.
Nobody in my immediate family ever sought divorce.
Mm,
So on that belief, you marry and that's it for life. So we both grew in leadership in the church, in youth group. And then when we got married, we went to college. We actually went to a small campus of a Bible college.
okay.
And so my faith grew. I had my baptism experience. We got married. And so our whole entire lives were rooted in church leadership,
Yeah.
being part of the church. He wanted to be a professor. So we went to seminary. And I decided after our first year of college, hey, I just want to be a mom. I want to support my husband. I want to be that good Christian wife.
Right.
So I will financially support him while he finishes his education. So we had 3 kids. We graduated from college and then ended up on the East Coast away from family,
Mhm.
separate, which is a narcissistic tactic,
Yes.
separate everybody out. Ended up having a few jobs where he worked at a college. And so we attended more conservative churches, I'd
Hmm.
say Baptist, fundamentalist,
Okay.
independent, very leaning that way.
Hmm.
And I was, again, a leader the entire time. I was a good pastor's wife. I,
Yeah.
volunteered. I did all the things. So
How old were you guys about that time?
um, this was our 20s.
Okay. And
So
you had three kids
we had
by
three
then?
kids. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So by 20, I think I was done having kids by 27. We had them
Wow.
in
Okay.
pretty close
Yeah.
succession.
I'm only just saying wow because I totally get it. And it's just that like we don't have a full brain till we're 25, right? And it's like
Oh, right.
all
Yeah.
these decisions that we were making. And I just think back and I'm like, oh my gosh, because I was really young when I met my ex, and it's like, oh my gosh, these decisions we were making when we were just babies without a full brain.
Well, without full brains,
Yeah,
right?
that you just don't even
Absolutely.
know. And then you factor in all those other things I've talked about on many episodes, but you factor in the things that attract a narcissist to us and why we're attracted to somebody like them. The whatever
Right.
is in us, for me it was like this deep need to be loved a certain way, and they're sweeping me off, he was sweeping me off my feet and
Yeah.
wanting to get married and have kids and all that, and we're going to build a great life together, and it's like, of course, yeah, here
Well, it's love bombing,
it
right?
is.
And in our 20s, we are right. No one can tell us we are wrong, right? Like I have kids. My kids are in their 20s now, and
Yes.
they know everything.
Right.
They're starting to like hit the other side of 20s, so they're like,
Yeah.
"Ooh, adulting is hard."
Yeah.
So even though people were like, "What are you doing?" It was like, "Well, you don't know. I'm following God's will."
Yes, exactly. And when you're in that atmosphere where maybe other people are getting married young around you, you're in that atmosphere. I just saw that in the churches I've been in, kids getting married so young because they want to have sex or whatever their reason is. Maybe it's love. I have no idea. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah,
it's hard because when we're making these arbitrary rules, maybe they don't seem arbitrary to other people, but like don't have sex before marriage kind of thing. It's
right.
like, okay, but that's forcing people into these situations of like, okay, let's get married. Okay, but
Absolutely.
you're 19. You
Right.
haven't lived a second. You don't even know. And it's hard because we don't even know. Like I think back to when I was 19, I didn't know myself for anything.
Exactly.
How would I be able to even identify any red flags at all, which don't look like, because love bombing doesn't look like a red flag at first. Love
Well,
bombing,
love bombing is actually what they portray in the movies. Here
right?
are gifts. Here is love. I'll pick you up. I'll be a gentleman. I will do anything for
Yeah,
you. Like that's what we're fed in
yeah,
consumerism is the
right.
romantic movies. Even stalking is glorified in movies, right?
Yes,
Like
so
so
scary. Yeah, this the societalized fairy tale, all that
exactly.
love at first sight sort of thing, and it's like it can be so dangerous, especially when the next bit of the cycle of abuse becomes that devaluing, right? It's like immediate. But people are like, but what about the red flags? I'm like, the first red flags don't look red. And then
Oh, right.
then they hand you 200 green ones, but then they
Right.
throw in another red one. And so you're confused and you're like, well, I guess he's, he's just tired. Everything's fine. It's just you.
Oh, yeah, mine was always stressed.
Yes.
And that was the
He had a bad
he has a
day.
yeah, he has
Yes.
a lot on his plate. And
Yeah.
church work is very hard. So as a leader in the church, I was very well aware and believed that he was carrying a lot of
Yeah.
stress.
Right.
But what's ironic about our situation is we moved around a lot for education. And I was used to that because I was born in England, moved to Ireland, lived a bunch
Okay.
of places on the East Coast. So we never were with people our own age. He was
Okay.
always appealing to the older couples in church that were like, oh, look at this nice little family.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, they're dedicating their life to the Lord. Like, look at the cute little kids.
I'm telling you,
So,
we were married to the same people. I am also an immigrant.
no way.
Yeah, from South America. Yeah.
Wow, how
Yeah, it's
cool.
so funny. And yeah, I just remember my ex had people who were older than us, always around him that just loved him. He was so great.
Yes.
It's so bananas. Okay, I'm not gonna I won't stop
So
you
I
for every
remember
single thing.
I remember my ex doing a retreat and one of the female leaders came up to me and just turned around in her pew and just said, how can you stand being married to him? He's just so awesome. And internally, I was like, let me tell you some things.
But you didn't.
and and I didn't. And it
Right.
also reinforced, I can't tell you because we are in leadership. We
Yes.
have a role to protect you as the congregation, and you don't get to know our business. That's not healthy for you as a congregation.
Mhm.
So, what ended up
Right.
happening as we moved along in our journey of being leaders, people were attracted to my kindness and my
Mhm.
empathy,
Mhm.
and he rode the coattails.
Okay. Yeah.
So it got to a point where he wanted to church plant,
Okay.
which is a whole big festering bunch of stuff. And he was attracted to a denomination that was more liberal, that allowed women to be in leadership,
Okay.
had a more, so for your audience, traditional churches, women can be Sunday school teachers, can maybe even be a children's director, but they
Mhm.
cannot preach from the pulpit. They cannot be a head pastor. And this denomination advocated for women to be in that role. So we were attracted to that,
Okay.
among other things, with their theology. And so we ended up in Montana taking a role where I was the children's pastor and he was the associate pastor. And so that's when the jealousy really started
I
to
was just
develop.
going to ask, how was he with that? How was he with that? Because even just with me having one more degree than he did, than my ex,
Oh,
that
okay.
yeah, I mean, I was just
That was
made to
too
feel
much.
yeah, it was too much. I was made to feel so stupid. It wasn't a real degree. We went through school together kind of thing, and I'm just like, "Yep, I think I got the degree though."
Yeah.
And so how was he with that you were in a different role, a higher role than he was?
Well, I was the children's pastor. So I
Yeah.
was theoretically in a lower role, but
Oh,
my
okay.
program gained more popularity.
Okay.
When we went to apply to the job, he said, I'm not doing this without you because of your gifts and because, I think that you should be in the pulpit. You should preach. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to take you at your face value.
Mhm.
At that point, I had gone back to school. It took me 17 years to get my undergrad degree, which he supported, but then was very threatened by me even going back to school. So I'm not going to say I should have because we don't should on ourselves.
Yes.
However, the signs were there that this probably wasn't going to be a setup for success. But
Yeah.
when we came in, again, I was going to prove myself to be worthy. I wanted to be ordained. I wanted to be a female pastor, which in and of itself is very hard to do, even if
Yeah.
the denomination says that you should. And he started to say, you need to calm down. Like your program is growing and you are drawing attention to the fact that my niche can't grow because I'm with the older people. And I'm like, well, that's how families work. Like they keep having babies and they need people to help them
Yeah.
and teach them. And I remember one particular VBS where I had worked really hard. I had 100 volunteers, I had 200 kids
Yeah.
coming. And the first day of VBS, he said to me, if you walk out that door, you are abandoning your family and you cannot show up for those kids because you have neglected us. And at that point, I was like, I'm not going to fail the kids. Like, I'm not going to disappoint the children
Yeah.
that are really excited to go to
Yeah.
VBS.
I
And
worked
so,
many a VBS and it takes so much work to
yes,
to do it and for him to just be like, you're abandoning us. But this is such a typical toxic, narcissistic,
yes.
reaction. I heard of people having their tires taken off their car if they try to go to work, stuff
Oh,
like that.
100%. Yeah.
Just like anything. It's like they want the money, they want you to have a job or whatever, but not if you're leaving the house or taking time away from them.
Right.
It doesn't make any
Right.
sense. So
So,
did you end up going?
I ended up going, and one of the things that became a pattern, like you mentioned, the red flags, how the red flags are very few, but the green
Yeah.
flags are huge. What ended up happening in our marriage was the green flags disappeared.
Yeah.
Like there was nothing there to offer support or encouragement or even like an effort of romance or an effort of love bombing. So
Yeah.
it got to the point where if I had a big event at church, including VBS, he would disrupt my sleep.
Yeah.
So I would go sleep on the couch. And then if I slept on the couch, he would rip the covers off me and kick me and pull me off. And so that's when it became physical. When he mentally couldn't control me, he
Hmm.
would physically be like, well, you're exhausted. You can't possibly walk out the front door. And
Right.
again, that strength of will inside me is like,
Seriously.
watch me.
Yeah, seriously. Well, I wanted to ask you, I had written this down. I wanted to ask you, like, when did the abuse start that you think when you're looking back? I think you said you have dealt with physical abuse, but when did
Yeah.
you even see the emotional abuse starting? Because I can clock it all the way back to the beginning before we even got married. Now that I have hindsight,
Yes.
now that I'm well educated in this field, I now can see it and go, oh, but see, they still like even thinking back to poor little, 21-year-old Laura, she didn't even realize those were red flags,
Yeah.
that she didn't even realize. So when do you think it started with you guys?
Immediately. I
Okay.
agree. At 16.
Okay.
At
Yeah.
16.
Just
I,
that grooming, right? That whole
yes.
like, right. And people, I don't think understand that grooming process of just teaching you the green flags here, green, 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 love bombing, blah, 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 and then red, and just training you to like not react to those and to not make a big deal about them. And because him ripping the covers off of you weren't going to walk into church and say a word to anybody.
No,
Right.
no.
So he,
And I was a leader. So who was
right,
I even going to tell?
right.
I didn't even have someone in the pew next to me. Like, I can tell her as my
A
friend.
trusted
Like, I
person.
couldn't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was wondering is if you had anyone at all that you could talk to and say like, "Oh my God, I'm so tired. He ripped the covers off of me. I don't know why he's being such a jerk." Even like that. Did you even have anyone safe to talk to?
So when we started at the church in Montana, one of the things this denomination had taught us, which I value to this day, is you need to take care of yourself.
Okay.
So when you see large megachurch pastors fall in from sin,
Yeah.
that didn't happen overnight.
Right.
So they really were about self care, getting into counseling. You should be in therapy. You should be in spiritual care so that you
Yeah.
can manage the stress of being in leadership.
Yeah.
So I had a therapist, and she told me 8 years later, she told me, I didn't even broach the topic of abuse with what you were telling me for at least a year because
Okay.
you didn't see it and you couldn't see it.
Okay.
So I
But
would
she
tell her
did, but
things.
she did think it was,
Oh,
there was, it,
100%.
oh, okay. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. She would listen to me.
Yeah.
But again, just to your point, I'd be like, why is he being a jerk? Like, I don't
Right.
know how I'm going to live the rest of my life like this. Like, how can I be a pastor if my partner is being an asshole? Right. Like,
Yeah.
how does this work? And so she would see me agonize and jump through hoops. And then I'd be like, okay, well, I'll see you next week. And maybe he'll have a good week. Maybe the stress will go down.
Yeah.
Maybe it won't be so bad this week.
It'll be better once this happens, whatever.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. I just
Exactly.
remember that I had a friend who said to me, she just, because she was in narcissistic abuse as well. And she said, yeah, I could tell something was going on, but I don't think you would have been receptive. And I said, I wouldn't have been. I would
Yeah.
have said all those things you're saying. He's just
100%.
stressed. He's just uncomfortable with being here because he doesn't know any of your friends. He's, those kinds of things. Because obviously in public, nobody saw it, those
Right.
other than maybe he was a little standoffish or something. But whatever I was saying, because I'm telling you, he was a mystery for me to solve. I did not, I'd be like, I
Mm,
don't know why he's so mad about this situation. Well, now I know it was just to manipulate me and just to
right.
gaslight me, and everything was a problem. And the whole thing with like food. He was so controlling with food, and you have to know
Mm,
exactly what's in the fridge. And I mean, I know it goes back to his childhood, but it doesn't matter. It was just a way to control me,
yes.
right? To know exactly, you have to know exactly what's in the fridge. And I'd be like, why do I have to know exactly what's in the fridge? This isn't what's important to me.
Right. Right. Yeah. And those things are insidious. They like slowly, like he
Yeah.
didn't show up on your first date asking what was in your fridge.
Right.
It probably
And do
wasn't
you
even
know exactly? No, he wouldn't have said that.
even 10 years in, he might not have, but that
No.
might have become 15 or year 17. And at
Yes.
that point, you're like, oh, new quirk, or
Right.
Okay, like why, again, why do you care? So those are the things that slowly get introduced,
And
the
that's what
chipping down for
and
the
I like that
self-esteem.
you're saying that because people don't understand because that I always talk about my ex grooming his next wife in front of me. It was
Yeah,
grooming because I was groomed. Okay?
yeah,
So I totally get it. So I see that now. Now that I have clarity, I totally get it. And it's like, you don't understand. We were married 25 years by that point. So what was I going to say? Like I had been trained for 25 years to not ruffle a feather, not say a word, not have, not cause a problem and not say anything that made me uncomfortable. I would go home and say like, I don't like the way you are around
yeah,
her with me, but he would just be like, "Well, I'm trustworthy. I've never given you any reason not to try." Which I think back to that and go, there were other women. I forgot about those because I was so brainwashed. She
yeah,
wasn't the only one. So people don't realize how I always talk about the boiling frog, that it's so a little bit at a time until you don't realize you're being boiled to death, you know?
right, right. So I'd say from the get-go, it was the verbal,
Yeah.
it was jealousy, there was verbal, and I wouldn't even say it was, ooh, you're wearing that today? And
Yeah.
it wasn't, there's nothing wrong with that statement, but it would just get me in my gut. And I just
Mhm.
go, I really tried. Like, that doesn't feel good.
Right.
But okay, I'll change because I want to look good for him.
Right.
So it's these tiny little things that if I had more confidence, if I had more self esteem,
Mhm.
if I had more years under my belt, I would
Yeah.
be like, well, I'm sorry you don't like it. I feel good as hell in this. I'm wearing it
Right.
anyway. Right. So it's those slow things that the physical didn't start with, started with shoving, started with
Okay.
pushing. That
Yeah.
was after my second baby. A lot of
Okay.
the literature out there will say it's when pregnancy or first child, but that was not true for me. It was second.
Mm. Okay.
Again, then it was, again, my gut, like, oh God, he just pushed me. And then I'm like, maybe that's not what he intended. Like, I'll just talk to him later about it.
Yeah.
And then you question yourself. So that's
Mhm.
the gaslighting. And then you're
Okay.
like, how would I tell somebody about this? Because it doesn't even sound real, or no one's going to believe me, because
Right.
that language has already started. Like, no
Mhm.
one's going to believe you. And then you build in the church and faith aspect of the
Mhm.
Christianity. And it's like, this is what I signed up for. I don't believe in
Yeah.
divorce. I'm not going to go anywhere. If I go somewhere, I'll be used goods. Nobody
Oh
I
my
know is
gosh.
divorced. How do I even get a divorce? And then how would I rebuild my life?
Mhm.
And I don't know if this was your experience. He wasn't going to let me take the children. So I had three
Wow.
young kids under the age of 4. And it was very clear when they hit older elementary, middle school, just like I had no way to take care of them. And
Wow.
he had manipulated them. So there was no
Mhm.
thinking that they would go with me. So
Yeah.
then it became, maybe I can survive until they graduate high school. Like
Yes.
maybe, so there was always this thought in my head, but again, I would never and didn't have anybody to verbalize. I was isolated from my biological family. He had
Okay.
severed ties with that.
Oh, okay.
And then again, as a leadership in church, I took that very seriously. I didn't want to
Yeah.
burden my congregation. It was also my livelihood.
Right.
So if I
Yeah.
said something, how was that going to go for us?
It's so hard. I know, I don't know if you heard Lisa Turkhurst talk about her story. She's with Proverbs 31 Ministries.
Yes.
Sorry. Anyway,
Ironic,
anyway,
but
I really
yes.
I really like her story because she did give her husband second and 27 chances and he couldn't keep it together. She had a whole thing, they got remarried and
Yeah,
all
I saw
this.
that. I never caught the whole story, but I do remember reconciliation is possible and forgiveness
Yes,
and,
exact and
all of that.
she was in that same position. She talks about this now on her podcast and she speaks on this, on trust and how trust when trust is broken because she's remarried to somebody else.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And she was in that same position being a leader in this Christian community saying like, how am I going to be a divorced woman?
Right.
She tried so hard. And I think sometimes that the community sometimes makes it look like it's a shame that it's like, but what about what what our spouse is doing to us. And I don't even know if this number is true or not, but I had heard the number that 25% of Christian women are sitting in abuse.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking, like, I'm in a no fault state. So I didn't even talk about abuse because, frankly, I didn't even know I was in abuse. I didn't know I
Yeah.
was being psychologically abused during my divorce. And I didn't realize until after, and I started healing, and I was like, oh, crap. Like, I started unraveling the whole thing and new career, new career being a narcissist abuse recovery expert. But 25% of Christian women are sitting in abuse. And I think to myself, if I was one of those women and I didn't even know, oh my gosh, how much higher is that number? That they
Yes.
don't even realize, especially sitting in one of the last churches I was in, looking at the pulpit where being gaslit and manipulated from the pulpit. It's like everything just seemed normal around me. And that was, how do you even know? Like, how do you even know?
And I think if I can go here and if I can make this correlation, you've got the interpersonal dynamics, right? So you've
Yeah.
got that narcissistic abuse and abusive relationship. And then you do have the institutional religious community
Yeah.
abuse. And what we're seeing now as a survivor playing out in politics and playing out in
Yes.
society,
Yes.
it doesn't seem to help a survivor come
Hmm.
forward and share their story.
Hmm.
It is hell.
Yeah.
They
Right.
lose everything. They gain freedom.
Right.
And as we discussed before we started recording, that comes with a cost,
Yeah.
right? So you don't only just have this Bible teaching women submissive, one husband, be
Hmm.
all you can be, you take care of the home and the children, he'll be what he can, he's all everything. Bible studies are promise keepers and be a man of integrity.
Yes.
Then you've got the pulpit that's just, again, families are everything. I know as a children's pastor that I can 100% own that we were not welcoming to divorced families.
Oh, okay.
We did not know what to do with that. I
Right.
remember kids that were shuffled. They'd be in Sunday school
Hmm.
maybe once a month because they were with the parent that would go to church. And those
Right.
poor children didn't know what to do. They needed some more support than we can offer.
Yes.
Or we had divorced parents coming saying, I'm single and I need help with my
Hmm.
kids. Like it was more childcare. Again, more needs than what we could
Yeah.
deal with.
Right.
And then societally, you have don't talk about abuse. It's from
Yeah.
lower economic status,
Yeah.
you know, and then you've got people that become leadership and the president of countries. And so there you go.
Exactly. Oh my gosh.
So from
It's
all levels, women, it's complicated. So if you are in the pew sitting there going,
yeah.
how do I even talk about what's going on if I even suspect this? Will I be taken seriously? How do
Yes.
I get out of it? What support is available to me?
Right.
And outside of the church, that's not any healthier because I'm not seeing
Mhm.
that successfully happening in my culture and in my
I
world.
know. Are you feeling trapped in a relationship that leaves you questioning your worth and sanity? Have you noticed the red flags and decided you can't live one more day in a toxic environment? Whether you've just left or are considering leaving a narcissistic partner, the book, Married to a Nice Guy, Getting Over Narcissistic Abuse, is here to guide and support you. In this candid memoir, I share my 33-year struggle in a marriage to a nice guy that was marked by emotional manipulation and abuse, revealing how I broke free and reclaimed my life. If you've been waiting for a sign, this book is it. If you've ever felt isolated, confused, or hopeless in your relationship, Married to a Nice Guy, Getting Over Narcissistic Abuse offers the understanding and guidance you need to break free and start your journey to healing. You are not alone, and you deserve a life filled with love, respect, and happiness. Order your copy today and take the first step towards reclaiming your life. So when I left, I felt really alone, and especially like the first few months, it just was a blur. I just went
Yeah.
to the beach and journaled and went to therapy, stuff like that. I think back to poor 2022 Laura. She didn't know any better because the
Mm,
bomb hadn't dropped yet. Because I didn't find out that my ex was dating somebody I suspected he was dating, and that then I started kind of unraveling the whole narcissism and all this stuff, and everything started happening. And so I had gone, after I did find out, I went to a divorce group at a church. I wasn't really active in church anymore, but I had so many people telling me, "Oh, you should try this group. You should try it." And so
Yeah.
I went, and I don't even want to say the name because I don't want anybody to go.
Yep.
So so I went, and that hearing that God hates divorce and just certain things like that, that reconciliation is possible. All those things I'm sitting there going, what are we saying to these people? What
Yeah.
are you saying to me? And I literally burst out crying because
Yeah.
by
I'm
this point I
sorry.
realized that I had been in abuse and was unraveling that. And she was like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I was like, I'm not reconciling with my abuser. And it was sort
Yeah.
of that you never know what God's going to do. And I said, no, I am not willing. No, God will take me kicking and screaming. I'm not willing. I'm not going. Not to mention, hello, he's engaged to somebody else. Like, what do you want me to do with that? And
Right.
he's sitting in the God hates divorce, just that scripture, right? In our workbook, going, can we talk about it? And not to mention everybody in the group that was there, we had all dealt with like betrayal, cheating.
Mm.
A couple of the guys that were in there weren't even divorced yet. And we're all sitting in a group making us feel like it was shameful for us
Yes.
to be having, gotten divorced, or these poor guys who weren't even divorced yet. They'd been served papers, and what they thought to do was, I'm going to go to a divorce group and start healing.
Yeah.
And you're made to feel shame, and that was really hard for me to stomach. And so I really started doing some work, and I'll put a couple of links in the show notes about Leslie Bernick. She's a great Christian
Yeah.
psychologist, love her, and she was part of the divorce group. She talks about this and how the church is just missing the mark on abuse and what we're saying to people. And so I just love her perspective on that. Listening now to Lisa Turkhurst talk about her perspective, because while I'm really kind of deconstructing with everything, I still love Jesus. And so I love to hear these perspectives of things that I'm like, oh, that's how I was feeling. Like,
Mm.
why was I feeling ashamed to be divorced when something terrible happened to me? Like, that's not okay. And we had other people in there that just told me the same thing. They said, I feel really ashamed and I didn't want to feel more shame. I'm like, we were missing the mark on that. Don't you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's no validation. There's no,
No.
and I think it comes down to we're not equipped as leaders. We're not equipped psychologically. We're not,
Yes.
it's mental health.
Right.
And I remember when I approached my denomination, I met with a leader that I trusted. So because we were part of a church,
Hmm.
I was like, this poor church does not know they're going to lose two pastors.
Yeah.
Like this is going to implode. So I went higher up to the denomination, someone that had been with me church planting. So I had history. And I remember them looking at me and going, are you really sure this
Wow.
is the road you want to go down?
Wow.
And I remember feeling crushed.
Yeah.
Like you are not even seeing me. You are not even
Hmm.
hearing me.
Hmm.
And you just confirmed my worst fear that there is not a place for me here. And you're not even my local church. I kind of took the local church, oh, they're going to save me, and put it up at the higher level,
Yeah.
which I was part of. I was trying to be ordained. They were
Okay.
my
Right.
people, right? They
Right.
were other leaders that understood stress, and the church does not do a good job. And I would offer that people find secular resources outside of the church to
Yeah.
gain the knowledge and also to gain the skills to learn how to cope. And then spirituality comes into it, and our relationship with God is important, but
Yeah.
almost navigate it in a way that you focus on self-care
Yeah.
and the resources and the tools that are out there that will validate you, will
Yes.
reaffirm what you're going through isn't healthy, isn't normal.
Yes.
There is a path forward. Yeah.
That's why I so enjoyed listening to Leslie Bernick and her podcast, and Dr. David Clark. He's also a Christian psychologist who talks about this. And he gives, because people use the biblical God hates divorce, and he shows you, it's like, if you're in abuse, you're allowed to divorce. And he gives you he breaks it down for people who want that. And to me, I felt like when I told this divorce group, called National and said, you guys are woefully unprepared
Yeah.
for abuse in the church. And I said, for Pete's sakes, you have Leslie Vernick. as part of your organization, start listening to her things because she could
Yeah.
be teaching something different. They just didn't use her, I think, the way they should have used her. And sometimes I feel like we're closed-minded and think, well, this can only be dealt with at the altar. We can only stay and pray, and we can only pray about it. But it's like, I think you're right. These secular organizations have resources for you to help you because we are a whole body. We need lots of different things to help us heal and to understand what's going on. It's not just about, well, you just got to stay married. That's not enough. That's how I really felt, like we were woefully unprepared. And as I started unraveling, I realized, well, the cycle of abuse is in the church as well in many places. And so that's why that's not why they aren't prepared, but it's still that cycle of abuse. I dealt with that when I was in leadership, love bombed and then devalued and then discarded when every once in a while, bring me back in, give me some breadcrumbs, and then discarded, and have been I've been deconstructing and unraveling since then. It's like, that's not okay. At my darkest time, I needed people, and it wasn't enough. Like, that I'm doing this, that I'm talking about it, that I'm calling it out, didn't make sense to people. And it's hard because we're a whole body. And I don't know, I just want to give people different perspectives on healing and their journey.
I think to add to that, as members of a congregation, we do put our leadership up on a pedestal.
Oh, yeah.
And we do believe that they have all the answers.
Yeah.
And I know there are many times where the church gets it wrong. And I also know that if you have a healthy leadership that you are under, they will tell you, we will walk alongside you. However, therapy is where you go. We love you, we care for you, and we're not going to abandon you. But this, there's limitations to us as leaders. And then when we as leaders are pressed in a hard place, we do rely on, we'll pray about it. Or have you talked to God? What does God tell you to do?
Yeah.
Because ultimately that's what you should be doing, right? Is listening
Right.
to God. But the example that I give is, I felt like I had two live cartoon characters on my shoulder. I would have, what would God do? But then instead of having the devil on my side whispering in my ear, I had a real life person that was telling me, you suck. You're a bad mother.
Yeah.
You're abandoning your family. You're career minded. You're selfish. So it was like this little voice of God became kind of like what I was listening to here.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so I think that's where the church does a disservice, is not pushing therapy and like having a list of therapists, right? Like maybe they vetted, or and I don't even think they have to be Christian, but then also understanding as leaders, if you tell somebody, pray about it, that kept me in my cycle. I was like, well, God hasn't made it clear that I should leave.
Right.
And he hasn't given me clear direction on how to do that.
Right.
So it's on me. I'm going to fall back on the Bible, and I'm going to be a submissive wife, and I'm going to be a good mom, and I'm going to do the best I can. Yeah. So you're very right. It is very broken.
And I like that you were talking about that, because I remember after I got divorced, I was like, oh my gosh, the voice of the Holy Spirit is actually a little more clear. I used to hear the voice of the Holy Spirit, but with my ex's in there, my ex's opinion in there. If God said, yes, you should be a speaker or whatever, I'd hear my ex saying, no, that's not a real job. No, you shouldn't do that. No, you're going to take away from your career. You can't do that. And so I've been in narcissist groups, where people are like, can you guys hear the Holy Spirit better? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that was like the biggest surprise to me. I'm like, oh, I can actually hear him without like conflict, that my ex is going, no, that's not right. You don't hear that. That's not the right thing.
I think if I can offer hope to those who may think they're in it or just out of it and trying to survive.
Yeah.
When you exist in that space and you have that very loud voice, when that voice goes away and that is no longer present in your life, your life, even if I was living in my car, I
Yeah.
lost how to make money. I lost how my community, lost my family, lost my house, like lost everything. And yet the freedom I felt because there wasn't someone criticizing
Yes.
everything.
Mhm.
And we have resilience. And so what I love to do with clients is this was your life here, and look at what you walked out of. Look at where you are now. Even
Yes.
if you're beat up and you're not sure head to tail, like what's going
Right.
on or where you're going, you survived that.
Yeah.
And that skill set reframed can launch you anywhere because you don't have this
Yeah.
200-pound backpack
Yes.
that's verbally in your ear. And no one talks about that. No one talks
Yeah.
about the freedom that you feel. And if you are high achieving in that relationship, the sky is the limit on what you
Oh,
can do.
I have done more in 2 years than I did in 32. Like that I'm doing the things I'm doing. I've
Yeah.
written multiple bestsellers, whatever, my podcast, everything. I look at it and go, amazing when you don't have somebody drag, like literally holding you back, going, no,
But you
don't
don't
do
know
it.
that.
You
You
don't
don't, you're
know
stuck
that.
in the shame and you're stuck in the like, how would I provide for my family?
Yes.
How do I get an apartment? Like, and especially for those of us that got married so young, I never
Yeah.
applied for an apartment by myself.
No, I never. Oh my gosh. This
And
is
I
the first
had,
time I've ever lived
yeah,
alone. 50, I
wow.
was 56. First time I ever lived alone because I went from my parents' house to college with
Yep,
roommates and then my boyfriend's house and my husband's house. And it's like, oh my
yep.
gosh, I'm by myself and I'm okay
Yes,
with it. And I'm okay with that. I'm like,
the
how do you do
beautiful thing.
things? It's so funny because thinking back, I'm like, oh, well, I know how to turn on the power and all those things. And I'm like, well, yeah, I did all those things in our marriage.
Mm,
I did everything. But I have to say when we got divorced after a few months, my dad was like, "Oh, I was kind of worried about you." And I was like, "Why?" And he goes, "I just didn't think you knew how to do anything." But that
mm,
was the look
the
that was
shell.
going on in the
Yeah,
relationship, that he was everything. He knew how to do everything when behind the scenes, because I was a stay-at-home mom for a lot of years. So
yeah,
I ran the entire show. And then I went
yeah.
back to school and got a degree and then became a
Okay.
speech therapist and stuff. And so, but I ran the show. And so I was like, if you guys should be worried about him, not me. Like I know how to function in this world. And without somebody like that, like you said, bothering me, saying you can't do it. My ex was into racket sports like all his life. And so I really wanted to try pickleball, but I just didn't because I didn't want to
Yeah,
accidentally be better than him or whatever the issue was going to
yeah.
be. So that's what I picked up after
Yes.
I got divorced. And
I
so
love this for you.
I know
Yay. This is worth celebrating.
it was really fun. And so I really wanted to try it. I'm like, well, there's nobody stopping me. So my friend and I went and they were like, well, you guys, let's play a little match. So like in 2 hours, we were playing a full match with people, right? And I was like, I don't know how this happened. So he goes, have you guys ever played? And I said, no, I've never, this is my first time picking up a racket. He goes, you're really good. I went to my car and cried because
Yeah,
because I wasn't allowed to try to even know if I was good or bad.
yeah,
And when he told me that, I was like, "Oh, thanks." And then I was like, "I'm going to go cry." And I did. I got in
yeah,
my car and cried that I got
yeah.
to try something and somebody gave me a compliment. And so it's been a lot of learning that kind of thing, those kinds of exciting things. I know how to turn on the power all by myself. Um
Well, and I would like to suggest also that when I
yeah.
work with my clients, again, reframing our stories,
Yes.
we become shells of ourselves, right? Like, well, and when
Yes.
we're married so young, we don't know who we are.
Yeah.
But I would argue that we are empathetic and we're gentle. There are reasons why narcissists attach to us.
Yes. Yes.
However, it is part of their playbook, which I think is funny because narcissists think they're unique. But even again, on the political stage, this is all playing out like, oh,
Yes.
I'll tell you what's going to happen next.
Oh,
This
there's
person's
so
going to get pissed
I'm
off.
telling
He's
you,
like,
I need to have a conference with all of us that are, because I'm telling you, all of us that are in the narcissist world doing this kind of work, we were all texting each other on TikTok ban day.
yeah,
My friend was like, "What's he doing?" I go, "Oh, I'll tell you." He'll be the hero tomorrow. Don't you worry.
Exactly. Yes. And if we don't comply, he's going to start getting angry. Like,
Yes.
oh, where was I going with this thought? We do get to we get to go back to our former selves, or
Yeah.
that's not like we get to recreate ourselves.
Yes.
And we get to live a bright and wonderful life that is so much bigger than we could have imagined.
Yes.
And if you look back at our ex-partners, they are recreating the same pattern. They are latching on to somebody else to turn on the power, have them forward facing and being on their arm, because they don't have the ability to recreate. Where if you look at us, we're not over surviving, but we're thriving, because it's like they would never pick up a new sport at 50 plus because they'd look like an idiot or have fear. We're just like, who cares?
Oh,
Let's
my
do
gosh.
it.
The first time he played pickleball, we were still married and he was with his family, and his family was playing, and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to try it." I'm like, "Oh, I'm sure you'll do great," because, and he did amazing. Oh, he came off that court pissed at himself for how poorly he did. I'm just like, "This is the first time you've ever held a pickleball racket in your hand." He's like, "I should know. I could." And I'm just like, "Oh, God." And that's the kind of stuff I don't miss, because I live my life, and I've talked to my kids about that. My kids are all grown. Just like, you're allowed to try things and fail at them and see, like, will I like this? I don't know if I will like this. I wanted to ask you, and let me think about what it was we were just talking about when you're working with your clients. Oh, I know what it was. You know, this is the kind of thing that I hear people in these spaces saying, I want to get back to who I was. But I have a feeling, just from a couple of things you've said, that, for me, I thought that too. But then I realized, no, I get to figure out who I am at this age and for the future,
Yes.
because I have been with him the majority of my life. So what am I trying to, and don't you feel like, I have no idea what your thinking is on this, but sometimes I feel like it's futile to try and go back to something that we're trying to grasp onto, when, rather than let's look forward. Who do you want to be? Who do you think?
That's a
Who do
great
you want?
question.
Yeah.
So I think for my situation, being married so young, when you were talking about living by yourself for the first time, I moved into an apartment. I had no furniture. I had nothing. And my friend came over. I had two friends that I had told after I had left. And they said, you can watch anything you want on your computer. And I go, I don't know what I like.
Yes.
Because I would be critiqued. And then it was like, I don't know what to buy at the grocery store, because I used to care for a family of 5.
Yes.
So I don't know what I like. And if I showed interest in something, that was taken away from me. Or I remember if I did go out to eat and I brought home leftovers, those leftovers were gone. Even if I said, please don't eat these. It was just the encroaching of the boundaries.
Yes.
God forbid I ate something he had. But anyway, so I think when I talk about going back, it is that rebuilding of like, well, what do you like?
Yes.
And then,
okay, I like that.
I used to watch romance novels or TV, but actually that doesn't scratch that itch anymore. Like that's actually not what I like, but it takes a while to get there.
Yeah.
Then you have the piece of I'm older.
Yeah.
Part of my experience, I am the woman I am today because of my ex. And I can be frustrated with that, and I have healing to do from that. But the truth is that is now who do I want to be, and what does Lisa want? Because I am 51. No, I'm not. I'm 50. I can't believe I just said I was 51. No, I'm not. I'm not yet. I have a whole year. I'm still getting used to that number. It is important to me. But it's like, oh, I do like this because I'm not getting the critique. Yes. So I think there's that piece. And then there's the piece of, and I love your story about pickleball. There's a quote from Mary Oliver, and I'm going to botch it, but it's something to the extent of, what are you going to do with your one wild and precious life?
Yes.
We have women from our community that are no longer here because they didn't survive.
Yeah.
they didn't get out.
Mm-hmm.
And that is happening every day.
Yeah.
So not only did I survive, not only am I 50 and have less fucks to give, but
Mm-hmm.
I also only get to do this once.
Yep.
So I am going to try pickleball. I'm going to make an ass of myself if it's necessary because I want to try it. So there's that aspect of pushing yourself, but until
Mm-hmm.
your foundation is backed and settled in your nervous
Yes.
system, you
Yes.
can't think forward, you can't dream
Mm-hmm.
because you're in shambles. And like I said, I left, had no house, none of my belongings. I had no money. The church was gone. My livelihood was gone. So my career was gone. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't go back to a church as a pastor, as a divorced woman.
Okay.
So, and I know there's probably people that would argue that you can, but I would argue that is, they don't make it easy, and no, that's not possible in my denomination.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I mean. I think that's a really
Yeah.
great question. So am I going
Yeah.
to get back to my 19-year-old self? No. I did need to go back and go
Yeah.
very basic. What food do I like? What
Yeah. What did I like? And
goes?
I just remember that too, that same experience. So my son eventually moved in with me and he said, "Hey, do you want to do red or green enchiladas?" And I was like, "I don't know," because I was
Mm,
never allowed to choose.
yeah.
So it was so interesting. It's still interesting. Some of the things come up. They don't come up as much anymore because now I can go, well, let me think about that. Okay, yeah, I'll choose this. But it was like, oh, wow. I never got to choose. And then my ex, it's in my book and it's on my first episode. I don't remember if it's in my book, but it's in my first episode. My ex, like I said, had an issue with food. And I used to hide avocados around the house because,
I remember that story.
because he was so controlling with why'd you buy so many avocados and now they're all going to ripen at the same time and blah blah blah. And it has nothing to do with avocados. It's all about control. This has nothing to do with avocados. So I went to Costco one day and I bought avocados. And this is when I'm living here on my own. And my son says, "Mom, have you thought about not buying so many avocados at once?" my and my other kids were like, "Is he still alive? Did you kill him?" But I literally stopped and glared at him. I was like,
Right.
and just kind of told him the story. I'm like, "I will buy 100 avocados and I will let them all rot on the counter if I want
Because I get to do that.
because I get to do that." He's like, "Okay, I was just wanted to have a
But no one
conversation."
knows. People don't know.
No, because he didn't know I was doing that.
Yeah.
No one knew I was being a crazy person hiding avocados around the house so that when I ate one, I could put another one out.
You weren't a crazy person. You were
I
living with a
know.
narcissist that
Yes.
made you
I was trying to
survive, do
survive.
things to survive.
I was trying to
Yes, you were
survive.
not
And
crazy.
I know I was just trying to survive, but it's just funny. I feel really bad for my son. So every once in a while, he'll be like, "Okay, I don't want you to get mad, but this," he'll say something. I'll be like, "No, it's okay, but I don't even care. Like, you can tell
Yeah.
me anything you want to tell me, but I may or may not do it. I don't have to worry about that now." So
Yes.
oh, okay. So we're running out of time. Dang it.
Okay.
But I don't want to tell people because I'm sure your story of leaving is going to be really big. So
Oh well, that's just wherever you want to go. I can.
yeah,
It's yeah.
I think we might have to just start wrapping it up. I
Yes.
want to ask because I always get asked about forgiveness and what that looks like
Mm,
from your perspective. I just know for me, I was told that if I just would, hurry up. I always say hurry up. I can never not say it because that's how it felt to me. Like you have
mm,
to forgive him and then you'll feel better and you can move on with your life. And I wrestled with that and didn't understand it. And as a good Christian girl, I was like, I should forgive him. But it was kind of it just didn't feel right to me. And then I heard Glennon Doyle talking about if you can't forgive and move on, maybe you move on first and then forgiveness comes along. And
mm,
I have really enjoyed that. I probably botched that as well, but I really enjoy that. And so to me, it has been simultaneous as part of my healing. It's happened, but I
mm.
don't know if I've made any sweeping generalizations. And so why don't you tell us something about that if you want to?
My thoughts on forgiveness. I remember that when I left, I was still praying for
That
my
things would get
ex.
better. Okay.
No, that he would find Jesus, even though he's a pastor and had it
Maybe
all
in the
figured out.
church. Maybe he'd find him there at the
Um,
church.
so I remember it was just like, Lord, I know he's hurting. He was very angry. He has never admitted any of this. So to
Okay.
this day, I am
Okay.
still the person that married his life and I am the big villain. But I knew that he was having a hard time because my kids told me that he
Okay.
was weeping and that he was destroyed and he didn't know what to do. So I would just pray, like, Lord, be with him.
Yeah.
And I remember going to someone who had offered spiritual direction for me as a leader. And I just said, I'm really struggling because I feel like I'm praying to God. But then when I asked to pray for him, it's like my whole nervous system gets out
Yeah.
of whack.
Yeah.
And she offered profound words to me. She goes, I don't think you should pray for him. And I did not know what to do with that. That was like pouring cold water on top of my head. And I was like, well, I don't know what to do with that. And she
Right.
said, if God loves him, and if you believe that God loves him, then he's God's to care for. And there are
Love
other
it.
people in his community to care for him and pray for him, but it is not your responsibility. And so
Love that.
when you ask me about forgiveness, I think that's where I've left it
Yeah.
is I don't know how to possibly, I do not hate.
Yeah.
I do not hate him. I strongly have taught my kids never to use the word hate, that words are very powerful, and that is a very strong word. I don't want him to suffer.
Right.
However, to this day, I live with the ramifications of the actions that he did to me,
Right.
and I don't know how to
Right.
forgive. I don't know how, and I don't know if that's my work. And I've tried. I've done hypnotherapy. I've
Yeah.
done cognitive therapy. I've done all the things. And I just keep coming back to this place of, okay, God, I'm going to trust you. And someday I might wake up and I've forgiven. And maybe that won't happen until he passes, like until his last breath is on this earth. But it's not within me at this moment in time. And I don't think God's mad about that. I don't have guilt about that. I don't have
Yeah.
shame about that. I've never heard
Same
anybody
way.
else say that. So I'm now like, some people might call me a heretic, but so we have no contact. So we got divorced.
Okay.
And then when I left on that particular occasion, a few days after Christmas in 2016, the last time I talked with him or texted with him was in January of 2017. We got divorced in 2017. And in 2018, the stalking began. And so I had to get a restraining order. So I have never spoken to him. So is it possible he's changed from having relationship with my children? I don't believe he has.
Okay.
But where was I going with that? I think the point is like, I have no way of knowing if he's changed.
Yeah.
And that doesn't impact how I show up in my life.
Right. Exactly.
That doesn't. And one of the things that I learned when I was in that apartment, and I actually had a flashback. So I don't know if anybody has had a flashback before, but it's very traumatic. And I just remember thinking to myself, he has taken everything. He has taken everything, but I will not be bitter.
Yeah.
And I will not lose my integrity.
Yeah.
So I will not cuss his name to my children.
I was going to say,
oh,
I lost that one. Okay. To the children. Get
to
it.
the children.
Okay.
I will never paint him in a bad light. They know the truth, but I don't like, well, what's your dad doing today? Like none of that. But he's not going to take the kindness and the light and the empathy that lives within me. And that's what I'm going to focus on.
I love that. I think that was a great answer because I have to say, sometimes the neat little wrapped in a bow answer is hard because if you're not there, then that's hard for some people to be like, oh, but I don't feel that way. And so, yeah, I think it's such a process. Forgiveness is such a process. So, well, thank you for being honest on that.
Yeah. And can I just add one more thing as you just
Sure.
said that?
Yeah.
Our relationship with God doesn't fit in a box.
Yes.
And so many times church does market that.
Yeah.
And those of us that have had trauma, we don't fit in the box and we question the box and we question the methods. And so we are the ones that are the instigators and we're the ones saying, but forgiveness doesn't work because he didn't just get angry at me this morning. He's literally physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever, abusing me.
Yes.
And this is not a neat little container. This is somewhere out here. And you still need to help me, but we're not equipped as a church to be able to handle people that are
Right.
outside the box.
Yeah, that is, and why I wanted to talk about it, because I feel like we are so woefully unprepared for
Yeah.
abuse and what that looks like. And there's so many dynamics. And these are sometimes lay people who are in these leadership
Yes.
positions,
Yes.
you know, that are just like, is somebody like me who was just, who had a table of women, you know, and was trying to love on people, but I'm not a therapist. I'm not anyone like that, you know? So it's so hard. We could talk about this for hours on end.
Yes. 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 But we
So
won't. We
I
need
just,
to end.
we have to end at some point, but I just wanted to ask you if you had any final thoughts and where people could find you.
The best way for people to find me is on Instagram.
Okay.
I am exploring different platforms
Okay.
as things play
She's
out.
so tentative. We'll put
Given
everything in the
the
show notes.
but I think what I would say, if someone in your audience has experienced abuse, is experiencing abuse, is not sure if they're experiencing the abuse, the words that have been spoken over you, the actions that have been done to you, they don't define you. You are enough, and you are so loved.
That got me. Thank you, Lisa, for being here.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Okay, let me gather myself so I can say goodbye. Thank you for being here. And guys, if anything resonated with you today, will you please reach out to us? Everything will be in the show notes, and you know, leave a review, tell Podcast Land you love us, and go find us on social media and tell us you love us over there too. So Lisa, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I know it's going to resonate with my audience.
Thank you, Laura. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining me today on the That's Where I'm At podcast. Did the story today resonate with you? Do you think others would benefit from hearing the stories we are telling? Please go to Apple or Spotify right now to leave a review so everyone in podcast land will know you love the show. We want to continue sharing stories of hope and healing. I'll be back next time. I'll talk to you then.